we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're going to have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the OneIQ Football Talk podcast. Brendan and Sterling here with you for yet another discussion in what could possibly be said as our favorite sport, best sport on the planet. But we are getting so close to actual NFL football. Training camp has started for a few teams, and then I know Tuesday, Wednesday, for a lot of teams, that's when it officially kicks off. I know my Chicago Bears, they started training camp here today. They've done a bunch of the interviews yesterday, and they did some today, and we're just so close, my friend.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, training camp for, I think, all the teams will be beginning by middle of next week. I know Pittsburgh starts up on Tuesday. They released their schedule this week for what's going down, when the public ones are, and everything. So, yeah, exciting. It's just around the corner now. You know, we got Hall of Fame game coming up in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, August 1st.
Yeah. August 1st?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, so like in a week and a half then.
Yeah, well, like
I
we
thought
we
it was
are
a little bit
close.
longer because they shortened the preseason.
Yeah, no, we'll have those first 3 weeks in August for games, and then we'll have that final week in August as that bye between the actual regular season. And I will say, like, I think the NFL should go to 2 preseason games. They should have a game, a bye week, a game, and then another bye week, because I think it's one of those things where, you know, you listen to people say on both sides of the coin of, you have a team that is, or you have teams that play their players and play their starters throughout the preseason, and they risk injuries, and then you have the guys that say, no, do not play your starters. We are not risking, you know, one of our top guys getting injured in the preseason for a nothing game. And there's always that flip side of going like, oh, you know, how much do you want to risk those injuries, and how much do you actually want to play those guys? I still think the first 4 weeks are essentially kind of the real preseason, because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, these games matter, but everyone is still going to kind of be going through that routine of still trying to get that football shape in there. And I feel like if we do 1 game bye week, 1 game bye week, that allows the teams to figure out a little bit more, and you're putting less pressure on some of the starters, because if they play in only those 2 games, they still have bye weeks to deal with in that type of stuff. And you could have it split of like, no, never mind, you shouldn't have it split, because some teams would have it in week 4. Never, just have it week 1 bye, week 3 bye, regular season.
No, I feel you for sure, because we see it every year. Somebody gets injured during that preseason, because it's, you know, you got a team that's playing their starters up against a team that's testing out their 3rd and 4th stringers, and inevitably a bad tackle happens or just something goes wrong, and we see a big injury in preseason every year. And
not just like a big injury to just a casual player. We see stars go down for the entire season. You go like, oh, and like every single time we see one of the big stars in the game go down, the question always arises of like, why are we playing starters in the preseason? We're just losing, and then, you know, we do this circle and dance every year at this time of the year of going, how much do you want to play your guys? I think for a team like myself that has a rookie quarterback, you need to play him in the preseason a little bit more. I know last year when we were having this discussion, I said, I don't want to see the starting offense out there at all. I don't want to see DJ Moore. I don't want to see Justin Fields. I didn't want to see those guys, because it was, if Justin Fields goes out there and gets hurt, who do we have? At that point, it was Nathan Peterman? We didn't know about Tyson Bagent at that point. He came one of those preseason stars that emerged and was like, okay, he's going to be the backup quarterback. If DJ Moore got hurt last year, then it was, oh, we just traded that first overall pick for picks. Well, sure, we're going to get DJ Moore, but we don't know. And so, but this is a little bit more of a different year, new offensive coordinator, new rookie quarterback. So you're going to kind of need some of those situations. So he does need to play.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, you need to get him in there at some point for sure. But that's also why I don't like doing fantasy drafts until after the preseason, just before the season kicks off. Just because there's nothing more painful than taking a guy in your first 3 rounds and then he gets hurt in the preseason and you're like, oh, well, there's my season because of a preseason game.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like, I feel like every year we're getting less and less of those big stars going down, because I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, it was like we look at it and go, there's going to be like 5 or 6 stars that are going to go down, and I feel like every year it's kind of gone down, because I don't remember who the big star was last year that went down in the preseason. I'm sure there was someone, but I can't quite remember it off the top of my head, which is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely is a good thing. Yeah, I'm trying to remember myself, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, it's nothing we.
I mean, either way, training camp's kicking off, so it's less physical than it used to be there too, so we don't see as many injuries. We talked about it last year. The things we look for more in training camp is more of the chemistry than the quality. We look at to see are these guys fighting with each other in these training camps? Are they getting along, having a good time? Because that's really telling for what sort of team you're going to be putting on the field. When you have a lot of drama in your training camp, it usually results in a 1-3 record to start the season. You're not going to come out very strong because obviously you're not all on the same page. And we both have new unique situations this year, as you said, between new coordinators and a fresh rookie quarterback. I've got a new coordinator in Pittsburgh along with 2 new quarterbacks, one a veteran and another who has sort of had a shaky start to his career but could potentially turn into a franchise guy still. So it's going to be interesting to see what both our teams choose to do, not only through training camp, but through the preseason. How many snaps does Caleb Williams take? How many snaps are Russell Wilson and Justin Fields seeing in the preseason? How are they determining which of those guys gets that starting position? So it's going to be a unique training camp in preseason for you and I.
Yeah, and one of the things that I heard you say is, some of the teams, seeing their chemistry and if they're fighting. Every team during training camp has a fight that breaks out between the offense and defense, but I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, I'm adding on to the point of just like, it's how bad that fight is and like how much it leaves a bad taste in the locker room, because these guys get heated. It's professional game. It's one of those things of like, it's early in the season. People are trying to do stuff and it's like, okay, emotions getting a little heated. Like every team will have a fight, throughout the regular season, that type of stuff. It's just, if it leaves a bad taste in some of the mouth of the team, that's when we start to see those, or we see multiple fights during the training camp. Because I remember like Travis Kelce got into a training camp fight last year and, he didn't have the best year, but he still had a great year in terms of training tight ends.
That actually might have been the injury. Was Travis Kelce last year because he started the season a little limpy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was due to the fight though.
No, it wasn't due to the fight. I think that was the preseason injury.
Yeah.
That we were discussing earlier that we were trying to remember who it was. But yeah, I mean, when it's offense versus defense, those types of fighting, that's not the big deal. It's more when you've got the positional issues, like we saw a couple years ago when it was, Chase Claypool and Juju Smith-Schuster fighting. It's like, I get it, you are battling for a position, but you guys need to be on the same page, because whether you're number 1 and you're 2, or it's the other way around, you still both need to be doing your jobs and you still both need to be working together.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that more concern me, is when it's guys on the same side of the ball that are fighting. That's when it becomes a problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's when your brother is right beside you and you're getting into it for stupid reasons. Those are pretty much just... those always leave a bad taste in your mouth. But speaking of training camp battles, we kind of went into this week going like, what is going to be the situation that we should talk about? And you brought up a good idea of looking at positional battles for some of the players on our team, for some of the areas that we think are actually going to be positional battles, and then take a few positional battles that we think could happen around the NFL that interest us personally. And so I know you have 3 for the Steelers. I only have really 2 for the Bears, and we can kind of go into why we have each of these. And then I have 2 for around the league that I find fairly interesting. And and then there's some other stuff that can be talked about. But I think we should do kind of a little back and forth. So I'll let you start out with one of the Steelers' positional battles.
Definitely,
that you think.
I mean, this was sort of looking at it. There's always positional battles that we know are going to happen before training camp, and that was sort of what I was thinking of doing here this week. Is we know certain positions need to be worked out. Once training camp starts next week, it's likely we're going to see positional battles for all the teams in the league that we're like, oh, we didn't expect to see that, because either a rookie emerges as a promising prospect, or a guy who signed in free agency takes that next step and is challenging for that starting role. And so we expect to see some new ones coming up. But for me, with Pittsburgh, there's the obvious glaring battle right up front that everybody in the league knows is happening, and that is the quarterback battle. I know that the team has said, oh, it's Russell Wilson's job, blah blah blah, but you can't not have them battle. Like, they have to have some sort of a competition to improve both of their play. We've got the veteran Russell Wilson. He's 35 years old. He has been dubbed the starter, but I mean, you got to give Justin Fields that opportunity. And if Fields can outshine Wilson throughout training camp, throughout the preseason, then he deserves that starting role, whether you've promised it to Russell Wilson or not. If we're looking at it and we're basing it purely on the stat lines from last season, then I mean, we're looking at Russell Wilson, who had 66% completion, 3,070 yards, 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, and a 98 overall quarterback rating. And then Justin Fields was at 61% completion, 2,562 yards, 16 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, and an 86.3 rating. So if you base it purely on that, then yeah, Russell Wilson is hands down the starter. He outperformed Justin Fields in every baseline quarterback stat. Either way, I want to see them competing. I want to see both of them getting first team reps. I want to see who has the better chemistry with George Pickens, with Najee Harris, with Pat Freiermuth, and with this new redesigned offensive line. Who's going to have the better ability to move these guys around how he needs to? Who are they going to listen to better? And honestly, I want whichever quarterback is going to be able to go in there and win us more games and keep us in those tight games so that the defense can win those games that they usually do. That's ultimately what it comes to for me. And I don't care which one of them it is. I want it to be whichever one is the better opportunity for wins.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, and pretty much my whole thing, and everyone knows that's been watching these last few weeks, that I've been saying that Justin Fields deserves. And if you're solely going off of stats, I always say stats are the biggest misleading thing in the entire game of the NFL, because you can have a quarterback, for instance, like Russell Wilson, and look at his stats and go, that's not a bad year. But when you actually watched the tape of Russell Wilson, there is a big reason why the Denver Broncos benched him for the final 2 games of the year, and then they took all of that money and said, you know what, we are just going to take that cap hit, we're going to release you. Like, to me, there are these big reasons of why. And you watch Justin Fields last year. Again, the stats are a little bit lower. He did miss, I think it was 4, maybe 5 games throughout the year with a broken hand. So, if you take those games into account, his numbers probably be closer to Russell Wilson in a lot of those similarities. I just go back and I go, out of the quarterbacks, just from the eye test that I saw last year, Justin Fields was the better quarterback last year. Sure, Russell Wilson had a little bit more stats and technically beat Justin Fields in a head-to-head competition early in the season. But I just look at it and go, the eye test, Justin Fields showed me more than Russell Wilson did. And I just continue to go, they need to give both of these guys starting reps. And for the Steelers, again, you go back to that old saying of if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. That is a real saying because you just don't really know, and you need to test both of these guys. If Russell Wilson gets the starting reps on Monday, Justin Fields better get the starting reps on Tuesday. And then you compare it and basically go, okay, who had the better day? Because whoever had the better day, they're going to get the starting reps on Wednesday. They're not going to get the starting reps on Thursday because we got to let the other guy, but it's just going to try to build off of that. And yeah, it almost feels like a situation for the Steelers going into their first preseason game of where it's got to be the starting offense is out there for whoever kind of is having more momentum in the training camp. Then the next drive, the starting offense is still out there. It's just a switch of just going, okay, now let's say it's Russell Wilson, and the next drive it's Justin Fields, because you really need to figure out which one of these guys it is.
Yeah, you do. I don't agree with switching them out drive to drive. I think you give one guy the first half, one guy the second half is the better way to do it, in my opinion. Just because then you give them that opportunity to build the chemistry as the drives go on, as opposed to you get a drive and it stalls. And okay, next guy's in. You get a drive. Like they're not going to be able to build up that momentum and that consistency. So I think doing it like one quarterback first quarter with all the starters, and then second quarter with all the backups, and then second half it's the other quarterback, all the starters in the third quarter, all the backups in the fourth quarter, something like that. It'll be a very unique setup. It'll be different from what we usually see, but I think that's the smarter way to do it, just so that you can really get the
feel of who it, yeah.
You need to see which one's going to be the starter. It's going to be so tough. And, like you said, the Steelers have no quarterback this season. We have not had a quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger retired. Hopefully next season we have a quarterback. But no matter what happens this year, unless they cut Russell Wilson, we don't have a quarterback because we're going to have two of them. Just like last year we had three. It's the way it's going to remain, unfortunately, until either Justin Fields proves he's the guy, or until we find somebody next year.
Yeah,
because it's not going to be Russell Wilson next year. We know that. He's 35 years old already. I don't see them re-signing him for another year at a veteran minimum. It's not going to happen.
No, and even if you do cut Russell Wilson, it's still one of those things of where I don't even necessarily think it's still just that one. Like, oh, it's you finally have your quarterback. I think it's more of the issue of like, okay, we cut Russell Wilson. We hope Fields is the guy. And that's the most terrifying thing for your team's position with the quarterback is that if you move on from one of these guys, it's just hoping that other guy is going to be good enough to kind of solidify and just settle everything down.
See, and that's exactly why I don't want to just go with Justin Fields out the gate, because that means that we're putting all of our eggs in that one basket for Justin Fields and hoping that it works. Whereas I've said it all off season, rather roll with Russell Wilson and let Justin Fields learn this offense, let him hone some of those quarterback skills, those footwork skills that he lacks, let him really get comfortable with this Steelers team, and then move forward with him late in this season if it's not going well, or at the start of next season if this season does go well. Because that's just it. You move on from Russell Wilson, you've got Justin Fields in there, and then
who's your backup?
Yeah, is Kyle Allen, which is not great.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's the Steelers are kind of almost in that lose position, with the fourth option being like the fine print on like the biggest document that you've ever seen, going of just like win, just because it's like if Russell Wilson isn't good, then you go to Justin Fields, and then you're just hoping. And if Justin Fields isn't good at that point, then you have to go to Kyle Allen, and you're just like, oh well, this is just. And then it's just it really does have that lose.
It's like we're betting on green at the roulette wheel.
On double zeros is essentially it's. This training camp for your Steelers is without a doubt going to be the biggest for your quarterback position. I think you and I have really seen in both of our lifetimes.
Oh, 100%. 100% it is. But I mean, if there's any team that sort of has that horseshoe up their ass that can pull off that 0-0, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, they found a way for decades to magically rise from the ashes of what could be a crushing moment that puts them into this full rebuild, and they managed to just keep going. So if any team's going to pull it off, it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I hope to God that that's what happens. I'm really hopeful. So you know
Yeah.
me, I'm always the optimist that way.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I
You
know
you've
I know we're on the precipice, but I'm going to remain hopeful that it works out.
Yeah. Again, you're the optimist and I'm the pessimist in this scenario because you've just had years of hope and joy while I've had years of despair and disappointment.
Yep.
And but yeah, so probably the easiest decision for you to just talk about that battle because it really is the most important battle. It might honestly be one of the biggest positional battles in the NFL this year. I know there's going to be there's going to be other discussions with other teams for certain positions, but when it comes to the starting quarterback on a team that is playoff, it doesn't have playoff hopes. It has, we know we're going to make to the playoffs. It's can we move forward with that? And if you don't have a starting quarterback, that always makes that a little bit messy. So this is why I truly think this is probably the biggest positional battle in training camp throughout the entire NFL.
Yeah, it's definitely top 3.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I had a little bit more. I'm not going to say struggles with the Bears because most of their positions are pretty solidified. When you look at the team, you go, okay, who's their left tackle? It's Braxton Jones. Who's their left guard? It's Tevin Jenkins. Who's their center? Okay, that's our first battle. You look at the right guard, Nate Davis, and you just keep going through all those positions, and particularly on offense. You don't really have a running back battle. You don't have a wide receiver battle. Yes, I know that Rome Odunze says that he's going to try to go out there and show that he's the number one wide receiver, but even then, there's going to be weeks where Rome is the number one wide receiver, where he's the 2, where he's the 3, and same thing with DJ, and same thing with Keenan. They're all going to be kind of rotating in that around type area and just kind of doing that type of split. But the Bears' biggest battle, in my opinion, on the entire team is the center position because this has been an issue for the Bears for the last damn near 10 years since Olin Kreutz decided to retire from the Bears. And they've just kind of had some Band-Aid guys, and again, you know, Cody Whitehair looked like he could have been a good center coming off of his rookie year where he made the Pro Bowl as a center, and you're just like, okay, but then you started to see some of the snapping issues that came from him, but now, you know, we signed Coleman Shelton from the Rams, and he was a decent center for the Rams last year, and then we also traded for Ryan Bates, who was mostly a guard in his career, but is also being slated to play center because he did play some center for the Buffalo Bills. And so this is going to be a really interesting battle to watch because I think Bates is going to be better served to be more of that rotational guard type of a player, and Coleman Shelton is likely for me to be the starting center, but it's going to be really interesting because, again, you have a rookie quarterback, and that center is going to be extremely important because the center is pretty much the guy that controls the entire O line. Now the quarterback can give feedback for the center, go like, okay, switch this, but the center's job is to do that, identify stuff, tell the rest of the guys, but also deliver a good snap and then get good blocking up the middle. And to me, this is going to be really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, this is an incredibly important battle for your Bears because, as you said, like, you've got a rookie quarterback. You need somebody in there that is going to be consistent and reliable. You know, you need someone that's going to be able to move the offensive line, change the line shifts, you know, confidently, easily, and most importantly, get the ball safely into Caleb Williams' hands so that he can do what he does best. And so it is a very important thing. And it, like you said, it's something that's been plaguing the Bears for years now. You know, Justin Fields never really had a solid center that he could rely on. You know, even going back to Mitch Trubisky, same sort of issues. It's been a problem. It is one of the most difficult positions to fill around the league. You know, you've got your quarterback, you've got your blindside tackle, and then you need a center. You need somebody that can snap the ball and that can be reliable in that format. So this is going to be a very important positional battle for the Bears, and one that they can't afford to get wrong. They need to get this right so that Caleb Williams can see success in his rookie year and build that confidence.
Yeah, and you know me, the last 3 seasons, every single draft, I'm going, okay, I want to see the Bears draft a center. Last year, it was if we can somehow get Jackson Powers-Johnson in the second round. But the more realistic thing for us, it was like, okay, if we can go out there and, why am I forgetting the guy that you drafted, or Zach Frazier in the second round from West Virginia? I was like, if we can somehow manage to get one of these two guys, that is going to be great. And granted, the Bears didn't have a second round pick this year, but it's still one of those things of going like, if we can somehow find a way, and even going into the third round of just like, okay, who's available, who's gonna try to be that center, and you know, it was just, and even the year before, it was like, okay, we need to find a center because we need that position solidified. And the last time that we did that, it happened to be one of your guys' offensive guards. Why am I forgetting his name? James Daniels.
Yeah.
He was drafted out of Iowa to be a center. They moved him to a guard for whatever reason. Granted, I think he's probably a better fit at guard in the NFL. But at the time, I was like, okay, like I know he's gonna have some struggles in his rookie season as a center, like most of them do, unless they're Tyler Lindenbaum, where he turns into a top 3 center in year number 1. But it's one of those things of just like it's been a position of just, this is a band-aid, this is a band-aid, this is a band-aid,
Yeah.
and I'm tired of it being just a band-aid.
Yeah, I get that. And I mean, honestly, this year it still sort of feels like a band-aid, albeit a better.
It's a much more strong band-aid. It's one.
Yeah,
It's a
like
band-aid that you can take into the shower and go to the pool with.
right. It's still gonna work. You know, it should get you through this season. But going into next year's draft, that likely is still going to be one of the top positional needs for the Bears, even if it's something where you go, okay, well, it worked last year. We're gonna sign him for 2 more years, but we still need to draft a center so that we can develop him to become that franchise center that we need to go with Caleb for the remainder of his career.
You got 2 second-round picks in next year's draft. One that's likely going to be in the top 35 because of Carolina and how bad they're probably going to be yet again.
Yep.
That's a perfect time to draft a center. Go out there, get either the best available center or the second best. You're going to be able to get it in that top 40. But yeah, so center for me, Bears. I know for your team, another position that you were potentially looking at was wide receiver and the battle for number 2.
Yeah, it's really a battle for both number 2 and number 3 because we don't have a whole lot, you know, with the where the roster is currently sitting. I'm still hopeful that our GM can get a deal done to get us a true wide receiver 1 on the roster, which will, you know, knock George Pickens to number 2, and then this is just a straight up battle for the 3rd spot. But I mean, we've got 3 guys battling for those 2 positions in our rookie draft pick, Roman Wilson. They signed and brought in Van Jefferson, and we still have Calvin Austin III, who was drafted in 2022. And so, you know, we've got, as I said, Roman Wilson, 3rd round pick. High hopes. You know, it was a bit of a gamble taking him. You know, he's got that missing ACL, so a lot of teams around the league were wary of bringing him in. But
I think you're potentially thinking of Peyton Wilson.
Oh, I am. Yeah, I mix the 2 of them up all the time. You're right.
Yeah.
My bad. But we know he's coming in hoping to make a splash. After that, you know, we've got Ben Jefferson, who was recently signed to a small 1-year contract He started last season with the Rams, was traded to the Falcons, so he's familiar with Arthur Smith. He knows what Arthur Smith likes to do, and possibly that could give him a bit of an advantage to get that wide receiver 2 or 3 spot. Unfortunately, I mean, his stats last year were nothing to write home about. I looked over it and I'm like, I'm not even going to make note of this. It was under 300 yards, no touchdowns. He didn't do anything. So he's going to have to prove something if he really wants to become a wide receiver 2 in this league and for this team. And then we have Calvin Austin III, who drafted in 2022, missed his rookie year due to injuries. He was able to get into the lineup last year in a minimal fashion. We had George Pickens, we had Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth. There was a lot of mouths to feed ahead of him, and it was in a horrendous Matt Canada-led offense. And so he also did not have any stats that were noteworthy. I think he got a touchdown maybe, but same thing, under 300 yards. It wasn't anything special. So one of these guys has to impress and wow during training camp and during preseason to really earn that wide receiver 2 spot, or what I'm hoping for, as I said, the wide receiver 3 spot, because I still hope our GM can find somewhere to bring in a guy as wide receiver 1, or find a solid number 2 around the league that we can offer up a piece to bring him in, and then we don't have to worry as much, because this right now, while quarterback is the biggest positional battle, this is our biggest positional need. We've got 2 quarterbacks that could be starters in this league, for sure. With the wide receiver, we've got a guy who can be number 1 if he's not double teamed in George Pickens, but who is better suited to be that number 2 guy who sort of just comes out of the shadows and makes big plays. Not having a second or third option right now is going to really hurt whichever quarterback is starting. It makes us a tight end heavy team, makes us a team that's going to have to be running the ball, which means you can't be playing from behind very often, which last year we were playing from behind pretty much every week. Hopefully this year that changes, but we have to go in anticipating that maybe it's not going to. And so this is a really important battle, and it's going to be messy in my opinion, just because none of these guys really, Roman Wilson being a rookie, I'm going to leave him out of it, but Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin have not done much to impress thus far in their careers, and so they're really going to have to step up and show what they're capable of.
Yeah, and I liked Roman Wilson coming out of Michigan. He was their number 1 option. It's just he was drafted in the 3rd round. He is a 23-year-old rookie, which again is not necessarily young by any means, but he's an older rookie in that sense. Pretty much mostly known for his getaway speed, and so that's why he kind of fell in the draft class for being such a good wide receiver at the top program in college football last year. And it's going to be interesting to see what he's going to be able to do. Calvin Austin, if I remember correctly, he was also a very burner type of a player. I think he played for Memphis coming out. Yeah, and so Van Jefferson, again, we haven't seen a ton of stuff from him throughout his career. If I'm just taking a look here at all of his stats throughout his career, his best year, he had 802 yards in that 2021 Rams offense, but ever since then he had 369, 108, and then 101. So technically he had 209 yards last year with no TDs. So it's that was more of kind of like a blip type year for him more than anything. And so for him to be the number 2 option for your team is, yeah, it's pretty. I know exactly what you mean right now. The hope is for your squad is that they find someone to be able to trade for, and whether that's a number 1 or a more solidified number 2, because even right now I still don't think George Pickens is a number 1 receiver. I think he has to kind of go through this year to really establish that. He's going to get his yards even when he is double teamed, but it's going to be a lot harder for him to do. I know in last week's video we talked a little bit more about some of the stats and that type of thing. But yeah, this is going to be a really interesting battle to watch because it's kind of like hoping on C level prospects to turn into like B plus or A minus prospects, and you're like, it's entirely possible. And Roman Wilson is one of those guys where I think he could be a B plus level prospect, but in his rookie year with the pieces that are currently there, it's kind of going like, okay, Van Jefferson is the elder statesman in the room, but when you have one of those elder statesmen, you want a guy that's had maybe 2 or 3 1,000-yard seasons or has been like a touchdown machine and is kind of going like, okay, George Pickens is the young gun, and I think he might only be 2 years older than Roman Wilson, so it's going to be kind of one of those. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head a little bit earlier. The quarterback position is the more important one, but this is the biggest positional battle on the team.
Yeah, it's the biggest need. It's the biggest hole we have on the team right now is that wide receiver after George Pickens. Because, I do think he has the capability of being a number one, but only if we have a number two that is preventing teams from double teaming him. Because we've seen it. George Pickens gets way too frustrated when he's double teamed, and that's when he starts making mistakes. That's when he gets that hot head, and he's not as productive at that point.
Yeah, and the only reason I say I don't think he's a number one right now, I'm not saying that I don't think he can be a number one, is just even when you're double teamed, number ones, they find ways to get open and it doesn't allow them to be frustrated. And so if you can only be a number one by having a proper number two, are you really a top number one or are you just a really good number two?
Very true, yeah.
But still, I think George Pickens is a great receiver. 1,000 yards last year. I know I predicted him to have a little bit less than 1,000 yards just because of a bunch of the other stuff. But yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to watch that one for sure.
Yeah. And so, who did you have as your second Bears positional battle?
Yeah, pretty much the other big positional battle that I saw for this team is, I know a lot of people are talking about the D tackles, but for me, the biggest need on this team is an edge rusher 2 opposite of Montez Sweat. Because Montez Sweat came in and he was phenomenal last year. He revolutionized the defense and just made it so good. But, one of the big conversations was, what are the Bears going to do with that 9th overall pick? Are they going to, because we all knew they were going Caleb Williams, but it was, are they going to go with receiver? Are they going to go with offensive lineman? Are they going to go with edge rusher? And so it is the edge rusher position that I think is the other big battle. And the two guys that I'm looking at in this battle are DeMarcus Walker and rookie Austin Booker. DeMarcus Walker came to the Bears last year from Tennessee, where he finished his last year at Tennessee with 7 sacks. It was going, okay, we just hope that we're not paying a bunch of money for a guy that just had a career year, and that's the best that he's ever going to do. Last year, DeMarcus Walker had 3 sacks. Even with the uptick for Montez Sweat, it was, to me, I hope that he can get closer to that 6, 7, 8 mark this year, because if he can do that, that's kind of what you want out of a number 2 edge rusher. You can't expect, your number one. You expect your number one to get, 10 plus, and it's a nice dream to have 2 edge rushers to get 10 plus sacks, but in reality, if you can get 6 to 8, you're in a pretty happy situation there for your number 2. And Austin Booker coming in, the biggest thing with him is people are comparing him to Max Crosby and saying he is similar dimensions, similar work ethic, and similar attitude, and a lot of comparisons to him. And I've been saying, you know what? I don't think Austin Booker is probably going to be that great near number 1, but if we can get 80% of Max Crosby out of Austin Booker, that's going to be big for the edge rusher number 2 spot. 5th round draft pick. A lot of people were saying that if he stayed in school for another year, he would have been a late 1st round edge rusher. And I think if you can develop that this year and he can play alongside Montez Sweat and kind of be that almost kind of like unknown on the opposite side, everyone going, we have to protect against Sweat, and they just leave him to his own devices, he might shock people, but he needs to go out there and beat DeMarcus Walker. And you know what? I would rather DeMarcus Walker win this battle and just say, you know what, we'll let the kid develop for another year, and he's going to be that rotational guy that comes in, and DeMarcus Walker can get up to that 6 to 8 sacks this year. But training camp is going to be very, very big for those two, because the team is already talking about how much they really like what they're seeing from Austin Booker.
Yeah, and that is a big position, big important one for you guys, and having a third that can rotate in and out when guys are tired or when there's a minor injury that takes them out for a couple plays, that's key. I know because I've got that on my team right now, and it is such a saving grace to be able to go, oh, well, okay, our number 2 guy's out, but our number 3 guy can come in and do just as well as our number 2. So that's going to be a fun battle to watch for the Bears. And yeah, I mean, if Austin Booker is good enough and is able to take that starting role, I would say then we're likely going to see some big special things from him this year.
I hope so.
It's going to be a big hill to climb to take that spot from DeMarcus Walker.
Yeah, and my fear with that is that if he takes the spot from DeMarcus Walker, it's because he is so good and he is going to have that special type of year, as opposed to DeMarcus Walker just being so bad that Austin Booker, this 5th round edge rushing rookie, takes that spot. That is my kind of fear with that, because I've seen that with the Bears, of where it's like, oh, we paid this guy a bunch of money and now this rookie's coming in, and it's like, oh, like the starter, the guy that we're paying money to, is just really bad, so we're having to play the rookie because he is just slightly better than this guy that we are paying a ton of money to. I've seen that song and dance too many times with this team, and it terrifies the hell out of me.
Luckily with Eberflus, he is a really great defensive mind, and I think even if that were to happen, I think he would be able to find a role for DeMarcus Walker somewhere, maybe even on the edge of the defensive line, that could create an extra dimension to that pass rush on some plays. So I don't think it would completely just wash out DeMarcus Walker and be like, oh, we're paying a guy a bunch of money to sit on the bench. I think Eberflus would find a way to get him in there. But ultimately, if Austin Booker shines so much that, like, you look at it and go, he is better than DeMarcus Walker, you can't justify playing the guy you're paying more money to just because of that.
Yeah.
And it is unfortunate. It is something the Bears have gone through multiple times, as you said. But sometimes that's a good problem to have, and you guys are finally starting to enter that realm where you can argue that it's a good problem to have, that the rookie you drafted is now better than the guy you're paying the money to, because that means your scouting crew is doing an excellent job, especially when you're getting guys in the 5th round that are competing for starting positions.
Yeah. And DeMarcus Walker, like, if Austin Booker goes out there and takes the starting job from DeMarcus Walker, he's not going to just be a second string that only goes in there every once in a while. He will play 3-tech for the Bears, because Andrew Billings, our number 1 D tackle, he is just a run stuffer. Javon Dexter, our D tackle, who a lot of people think he's gonna have a big step up this year. He's gonna be kind of that every down D tackle. But if it's one of those plays where it's clearly a passing down, where it's like 3rd and 9, it's like, okay, Andrew Billings, there's no point in having you out there. You're not in a rusher. Let's put DeMarcus Walker out there. Have Montez, DeMarcus, Dexter, and then Booker all on the offense or all on the defensive line, and that's what it can be. Like, we saw that last year. We saw that situation pop up where DeMarcus Walker played all of the positions with the exception of nose tackle, because he does have that size. So, like, yeah, he would still be in the rotation, but it would just be kind of unfortunate unless Austin Booker is going out there and he's like, I'm gonna just casually drop 10 sacks as a rookie this year, which I would be. Let's do it. Give me that.
Yeah,
give me that.
I'd be super happy if that happened, for sure. I think every Bears fan would, because, as we discussed last week when we were talking about some of the stars for these teams, I predicted Montez Sweat to be up over 15. So if you can have Sweat over 15 and a rookie edge rusher on the other side getting over 10, then you guys are looking at the next 3 years going, oh man, our D is going to feast.
Yeah, and one of the things, I don't even know if I've even necessarily said this to you, but this entire offseason, it just it's having one of those off seasons to me as a Bears fan of going like everything just seems to be kind of falling into place and working as it should of going, okay, we got the starting quarterback, we made a trade for a veteran that is going to be good in Keenan Allen, and then we've signed some free agents, and every team every once in a while finds a dominant edge rusher in the middle to late rounds. Why can't it be this guy for us? And it's kind of had that feeling all year long where again, the pessimist in me is going, it's hitting that stuff down with a hammer and going, no, bad, no allowed to have hopes, no hopes for you. But there's that other side of going like, it just feels like the Bears are going to get that break this year of where it's like, okay, they're just nailing on everything. And because again, you know me going into that draft process, it was Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. Those were the guys that I wanted at 1-9, and it just so happened to fall that way. And it was like, oh, great! Like this is exactly the way that we thought the Bears were going to go down, and this is awesome. And we somehow got the punter that I wanted as well in Torrey Taylor. Like it just kind of has that feeling of just like the Bears are just going to get that win this year, and hope that Austin Booker just kind of comes out of nowhere and he's like, hi, I'm going to be the next Max Crosby of the league, and you're already pairing me beside Montez Sweat. Thank you very much. That's my TED Talk. But again, the pessimist is going, no, stop it.
No, that's fair, but it's going to be an interesting battle to see.
Yeah, and so for your last battle, for your Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm forgetting which position it is. Is it on? Because I think it...
Yeah. Last one here I have is the battle that we're going to see for middle linebacker 2. We all know Patrick Queen is the number one. We just signed him to a big contract, so he will be the number one middle linebacker. But with this defense that the Steelers play, we often have 2 out there. And so the question is going to be who will be that number 2. First, I've got Cole Holcomb, returning. He's coming back from an ACL injury, so I don't think we're going to see him competing in the training camp battles. I'm not even sure if he's going to quite be making it back for the start of the regular season. But when he does come back, I do think he's just going to get that number 2 spot anyway, just because of how good he is. Before that injury last season, he had 54 tackles. He's still an excellent linebacker, great mind, great ability. So once he is back to full health, I do think he'll get that. In the meantime, we still have 2 other guys that are going to be competing for that spot. One of them, another returning player in Landon Roberts, who ultimately led our linebackers in tackles last year to 101 and adding 2.5 sacks. Yet somehow it feels as though he's already being relegated to be the odd man out and to land at the bottom of that middle linebacker depth chart, unless he's able to just wow people here in training camp, and unfortunately for him, he is going to be competing with the shiny new toy that the Steelers drafted also in the 3rd round in Peyton Wilson. They drafted him out of NC State. He won multiple awards last season in NC State.
Phenomenal middle linebacker. Phenomenal middle linebacker.
He is. He's phenomenal. He's fast. He's aggressive. He's physical. He's everything that Pittsburgh wants in a middle linebacker.
He's the modern day middle linebacker.
Right? The question is, will he still be a little bit too green to really be a starter in the NFL quite yet, being a rookie? And so he's going to have to impress, and he's going to have to be perfect in training camp in order to really land that number 2 spot alongside Patrick Queen to start the season. So it's tough to say. A lot of people are saying, oh, Landon Roberts is going to be the odd man out. I think Roberts is going to be able to do enough to at least be a bit of a rotation with Peyton Wilson to start the season until Cole Holcomb is truly at 100% to come back. And then, unless Peyton Wilson does miraculous things out there, he will likely then see that step back, let Holcomb come back in, be that number 2 guy. We'll have that solid 1-2 punch at middle linebacker. And Peyton Wilson will be able to take the experience and go, okay, well, next year that spot's mine.
Yeah,
But it's going to be a fun battle to watch because, if one of these two guys in either Roberts or Wilson is good enough, does that then create this opportunity for the Pittsburgh Steelers to take Cole Holcomb when he's healthy and go, we don't really need you anymore. Maybe we're going to put you up on the trade block and see what's out there. Because he is projected to be back by likely week 3 or 4 to full health. So that it will be long enough before the trade deadline that you can get him in there for a couple games, showcase that talent still, and then go, who wants him? So
yeah.
I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this middle linebacker 2 position.
This is without a doubt going to be a big one. I think no matter what happens, the Steelers are keeping all their middle linebackers because they saw what happened, and because they were down to what, their 8th, 9th middle linebacker at one point last year.
We were down to pulling guys out of retirement.
Taking guys away from trade school to be your starting middle linebacker for your defense. And again, Patrick Queen was such a big get for the Steelers. That was their biggest need. Cole Holcomb he's going to be out, and I do think Peyton Wilson is going to be a really good linebacker because he is that traditional linebacker. He's got the speed, he's got the size, he's got the knowledge of it. I believe he won the award for best linebacker in college last year, and the only problem with him is that ACL situation of just not having one. Most people expect him to not really make it or get a second contract just due to not having it, and it's just the concern. But I think he checks all the he's checking all the green boxes right now for health, and I think he is going to solidify himself at least in the early stages of this year being that number 2 beside and behind Patrick Queen, because again, they're not going to have 2 middle linebackers out there every single play. It's going to be Patrick Queen, but when they do, I think it's probably going to be Wilson, and then Holcomb, when he comes back, they're probably going to be doing a lot of rotation based off of situation of what they think and who they feel is better in the pass, who's better in the run. And it's probably going to also be game to game going like, okay, we know that Wilson, you're better at covering tight ends. I'm not saying that he is. I'm just saying that broad view. It's like, oh, we know you're better at covering tight ends, so you're going to get a lot of play time here today because they have a tight end that we know that you need to cover. And this is going to be an interesting battle, and one that I think Wilson's probably going to edge out, and because he is that 3rd round rookie, he has all the intangibles, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Oh, 100%, yeah. Yeah, I think the Steelers are just a little bit nervous.
Yes.
Because the last couple of middle linebackers we've drafted have not quite worked out the way we expected, and it's usually due to injuries. And so
it's tough. I get it.
I'm excited to see it. There were other positions I could have picked. Like, I know there's going to be a battle for that center position, and I know Dan Moore Jr. is battling both of our young tackles for a position. But honestly, I think that's a more solid. I think Zach Frazier is going to win that center battle. I think Dan Moore is going to be just that plug and play tackle.
He's going to be your swing tackle.
Linebacker one was just more exciting to me. And I feel like it's more important as well because of the injury history and that seeming curse that we've had at that position since Ryan Shazier went down.
Yeah. And speaking of positional battles, like what we said before we got into this, we picked a couple for our teams, and then we're picking a few that excite us around the league. I know I have 2.
Yep.
I believe you also have 2 as well.
I have 3.
Okay, yeah. So no worries there. But yeah, for me, one of the positional battles that I'm actually really interested in seeing this year is the Chargers' number 1 receiver spot, because again, they drafted Ladd McConkey out of Georgia I believe it was the 1st or 2nd pick in the 2nd round this year, and they had Quentin Johnson, who was a 1st round pick in last year's draft as a wide receiver out of TCU, and they also have Joshua Palmer, who is on the team. I don't remember too much about him, of where he was drafted and yada yada yada, but this is going to be really interesting because this is a team that could very easily contend for playoffs this year, because when you have a top 5 quarterback, you're going to be a team that is going to contend every single year for playoffs. You will also have the coach that knows how to win in this league because he's done it. He did it, for San Francisco. He didn't win the final thing, but he was very successful when he was there. Won in Michigan. He's a winner head coach, and that is a very important thing. But this is going to be a battle that is going to be very important because they brought in 3 rookie wide receivers through the draft. And Quentin Johnson, he was a first-round pick last year as a wide receiver. This is a guy that, you just have to hope that he just had a bad rookie year and that he can kind of get back up to form. But this is going to basically be the battle, unless they make a trade, which is something that we can talk about a little bit later. But unless they make a trade for a solidified guy, these 3 guys are all going to be battling to see who's going to be the number 1 target for Justin Herbert moving forward. Because again, they don't have Keenan Allen, they don't have Mike Williams. These are the best 3 options on this team, and they're all going to be fighting for it.
Yeah, and got to remember, also don't have Austin Eckler anymore either, who is another prime target out of the backfield. So, yeah, this is going to be a big battle for the Chargers, finding who is going to, because it's not just a battle for 1, it's a battle for 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Like, it's who's catching the ball from Justin Herbert this year. Yeah, it's going to be a good battle for sure. Interesting one.
Like what I said about the Bears, where it's like every single week, one of those 3 guys, whether it's Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, or Rome Odunze, could be the 1, 2, or 3. But that's just due to it's just like, oh, it's like he's just having the better day, and so he's turning into the 1 today. With these guys, it's like, please God, let one of these guys be the 1. Please, please.
Yeah, very opposite end of it, and quite fitting actually, because I also have an AFC team that has a big wide receiver battle that they're looking for a number 1, hoping to God that one of them emerges, and that's the Buffalo Bills. They need to find somebody. They lost both Diggs and Davis in the offseason. They need to figure out who's going to be the primary target for Josh Allen, and there are a lot of new faces here. They drafted Keon Coleman, who is a promising young rookie, but can you rely on a rookie to be a number 1? They also signed multiple free agents in Curtis Samuel, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and even a guy we're both familiar with in Chase Claypool is going to be competing for that position. And so who among them is going to emerge? They also do still have Khalil Shakir, who was a solid number 3 for them last year, but is he ready to take that step to be the number 1? He has the most chemistry with Josh Allen, having been there already, so that does give him that advantage, but it's going to be an interesting one overall. I think it's going to be similar to the Chargers, where whichever 3 or 4 of these guys make the starting roster, it's going to be week in and week out going, please let one of these guys emerge as the number 1. Let one of these guys have a Gabe Davis week this week. What it's going to be every week for the Bills. And that is not a good thing, because this Bills team already struggled so much last year at that position when they had stars in Stephon Diggs and, sometimes Gabe Davis. And so this year it's going to be really shaky for them. I'm worried for the Bills with all the star power they have at certain positions. Are they going to be able to maintain that pace and still be considered one of the best in the AFC alongside the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Dolphins now? I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. I think it's going to be more of a sack race between them and the Chargers to see who can limp into the playoffs.
Yeah. Khalil Shakir had 600 or just a little over 600 yards last year, and so that's why he's kind of slated as that number 1 guy. But yeah, like this is a team for sure that is going to have some interesting. I like Curtis Samuel as a number 3 wide receiver. This was a guy that if the Bears didn't go out and trade for Keenan Allen, and I was like, okay, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Curtis Samuels, that's pretty solid for him to be the 3rd. Keon Coleman, he's gonna have big shoes to fill because he's gonna be the shiny new toy, and that is just gonna be such an interesting battle to watch. And who knows, maybe, Chase Claypool, finds a home.
Maybe he finally gets to be a number one, just like he always dreamed of.
Yeah.
His dream, our nightmare.
I just remember when we both heard that Chase Claypool signed in Buffalo. I think after the 10 minutes of laughing, we kind of went like, maybe.
We thought he was on his way out. Like
We
he
thought
didn't get it done with the Steelers. He didn't get it done with the Bears. He didn't get it done with the Dolphins. We were like, okay,
he's
now
going to
you're
the
gonna
BC
be
Lions.
up here and playing for the BC Lions. There you go. There's the rest of your career. Which, don't get me wrong, I think Chase Claypool in the CFL would actually be very successful.
Oh, he'd be dominant.
Because of his size and stature and the fact that
And
he
his speed,
understands
too.
the game, having grown up here.
Yeah.
You know, I think he'll be very dominant when it happens because, and I say when, not if, because I don't think it's going to pan out for the Bills unless all these other guys completely fall flat. But I don't think that'll happen. Like you said, Curtis Samuel, solid number 3 with potential for number 2. I mean, he was the number 2 in Washington behind Terry McLaurin.
Yep.
You know, Marcus Valdez-Scantling. He had some great moments with both Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. So he has the potential to be a good wide receiver. He has those drop issues, but that, you know, maybe that was more because he was hanging out with Kadarius Toney too much and it rubbed off a bit. So maybe that'll change. So
they were eating too
it's
much
an uphill
popcorn.
battle for Chase Claypool. He's got a lot of talent in front of him that he's going to have to overcome. And, you know, that I didn't even mention Khalil Shakir or Keon Coleman, who are, I don't think Chase Claypool's making this team.
I do think he's gonna make the team, but he's going to be kind of as that just 4th or 5th guy that's probably going to get a few plays every here and there. I don't think he's going to stay on the team for the entire year because I think they're going to cut him because he's going to start to become a head case and go, I'm the best. But yeah,
Wouldn't it be funny to see him get traded yet again? This time for like a 7th round pick or maybe you know, a packet of ketchup.
Because he got traded for a 2nd round pick, then a 6th round pick.
Right, and now it'll be a 7th or less.
We'll give you a 7th in 2023 or 2030.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we'll send you a pick so far in advance that it'll be one of those moves when people look at that, it'll be like, "Oh, so funny enough, this pick was actually traded all the way back in 2024 for Chase Claypool." And now it's just finally coming to fruition. You know, Chase Claypool, you know, leads the CFL for the 3rd year in receiving yards. Yeah.
We pick on that guy so much.
He deserves it.
He does. I had high hopes for him, and he let us down. He was supposed to be, you know, the Canadian,
the Mapletron,
who you know put us back on the map for being able to produce star football players. And
Mapletron, man.
Right? He hated that nickname so much. Maybe he should have embraced it.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have been better for him.
He always talked about how he wants to be the next Calvin Johnson. It's like, okay,
right?
Or you're Canadian, Mapletron.
Yeah.
It's a fitting name. Are you ashamed of your heritage?
Right. But moving on, one of the other positional battles I was looking at is a quarterback battle. And this is one that is going to be really interesting to watch. Fun, you know, amusingly enough, the next 2 battles I have are going to be discussed very heavily in your household over the next 4 weeks. First one is the Denver Broncos quarterback position. It is a mess in that quarterback room right now. And for that reason, I think it's going to make it really interesting to watch, to see who's going to emerge as the new starter in Denver. The Broncos, as we all know, they drafted Bo Nix as the eventual future starter and hopeful savior of this team. Will that be week 1 that he's starting? We don't know, because he's got 2 interesting guys that he's going to be competing with. They've got Jared Stidham on the roster. Big, fancy, maybe. And former Jets QB, Mr. Milf Hunter himself, Zach Wilson. It's a mess, man. I can't wait to see how this plays out because, they traded for Zach Wilson, and at that point, he was slated as the number 3 on the depth chart, coming from a Jets team that reached up to grab him and draft him because they thought he was so special. And I, man, I don't even know what more to say about this. I think Bo Nix likely will be starting for this team by the middle of the season at the very latest, if not at the start. I don't think Jarrett Stidham should even be considered for the starting position. He's never not done anything to impress me at any point. Zach Wilson at least has had some flashes, some shimmers, and he's got a guy in Devontae Adams who can make special things happen.
Devontae Adams with the Raiders.
Oh, right. Yeah, my bad. Cortland Sutton.
Yes,
is the one
there you go.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah. Mix them up because they're both in such a mess right now. Yeah, so he's got some options, but I don't know, man. It's going to be fun to watch just because it's so bloody messy in Denver right now. They're paying more money to my eventual starting quarterback than they are to all 3 of their potential starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, the Denver Broncos quarterback situation, it's kind of like looking at a horrific car crash where it's like you shouldn't really be excited to look at it, but you're like, I am just really wanting to look at this because, of course, you want to see how bad it is. And looking at ESPN right now, they always show the depth charts, and they have predicted Bo Nix the starter, Jarrett Stidham is the second, and Zach Wilson as the third. But yeah, I do think Bo Nix is going to be the starter, but this pensioner that they have, because reminder, Bo Nix, people, is 25 years old. He is almost as old as me, and he is a rookie. Or pardon me, he's 24. He's going to be 25 when the season starts. And like he's old man, but dude's basically collecting a pensioner's check in terms of as a rookie. Now he is going into a situation where he does have a fairly good head coach, and who knows how to work with a quarterback similar to Bo Nix. We saw what Sean Payton was able to do with Drew Brees. I'm not saying Bo Nix is Drew Brees, but they have some comparables in their knowledge of the game. Maybe not physically wise, but yeah, this is just going to be one of those situations where, the Broncos drafted him in the first round. They kind of had no other option because what were they going to do? Were they going to roll out the year with Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham? No. If Bo Nix was there, might as well draft him. And I said they might as well draft him, and they did. And it's like, okay, it's still going to be pretty mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like good job, guys. I'm still gonna look at the car crash. I'm still gonna get my popcorn out and watch. But yeah, that's gonna be.
You're gonna get disowned by the end of this season with how good your team's becoming and the dumpster fire that these other 2 teams are becoming. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, my folks always joking me to go like, oh, your quarterback is so like they'll say stuff, and I'll be like, both of you would do unspeakable things to have him on your team. Like, yeah, but he paints his nails. I don't care if he takes it up the ass. Like, if he wins football games, both of you guys in next season are going to be like, yeah, we wish we had Caleb Williams. Both of you now are wishing you had my quarterback, so shut up.
Yep.
And yep, so one of the battles that I would like to talk about is a running back battle for the Carolina Panthers. And now when you're talking about the Carolina Panthers, everything kind of needs to be put into a grain of salt because they are bad. They are very bad. They have the likelihood of being a bottom 3 team yet again this year. But the running back battle is one that I find interesting. They drafted Jonathan Brooks in the second round. He was my favorite running back coming out of this year's class. Granted, this year's running back class a little bit weaker than normal, but I still think Jonathan Brooks is a very talented back, and he's going to be paired up against another Canadian in Chuba Hubbard, who in his first season when he was still playing with Christian McCaffrey and McCaffrey kind of got shipped away, he looked like he could be a good replacement for McCaffrey. Last year, as the kind of starter, kind of going along with who was the guy that they brought in from the Eagles, if I'm trying to remember correctly. They signed the Eagles running back last year. And as I just take a look here at the depth chart, it was Miles Sanders. Sanders was thought to be kind of that starter because they gave him a decent chunk of money. Chuba Hubbard kind of took over that role, but even then, the Panthers were such a mess. This is just genuinely going to be a fun battle of like, okay, you have a talented player in Brooks. Please utilize him properly. And let's see if he can actually win the job, or is this just going to be the classic Carolina Panthers of the last few years of just messing things up?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be an interesting one to watch, but much like the train or the car crash of the Denver Broncos, that's kind of what it's like watching the Panthers right now.
Yeah.
No.
That's more of a plane crash, honestly, with the Panthers. And as a Bears fan, it feels really fun to poop on a team that's not even a rival just because we destroyed them in a trade and they made very dumb moves off of that. And as someone who is a talent evaluator like myself, me looking at them going, if you select Bryce Young, you are making a terrible mistake over CJ Stroud. And of course, everyone then proceeded to watch the Carolina Panthers. I think after like week 4 go, we fucked up.
Yep.
And
100%. But I mean, that being said, the team around Bryce Young is still bad enough that I really wonder if it had been CJ Stroud there, could CJ Stroud have really rallied that team to get to the playoffs? I don't think so.
No.
I don't think there's enough talent there that CJ went into a much better situation in Houston.
Without a doubt. But I will say with CJ Stroud, no one knew that Nico Collins was going to have that breakout year. People liked Tank Dell, but they didn't expect him to be that good. And, the defense was played really, really well. And I think CJ Stroud would have had the Panthers in a position of where the Bears would not have had the first overall pick. They likely would have had the 7th or 8th. They would have been higher up. They would have won more than 2 games. And people would look at them and go, okay, they're on the upswing. They need this, and this. They can do this, and this. And that would be the situation that they're in, as opposed to, 5'6" Bryce Young, weighs 110 pounds soaking wet, trying to throw a football.
Yeah, for sure. We both have fun watching the Panthers suffer right now.
Yeah, it is quite enjoyable, especially for me. Because that was...
Yeah, because you still have draft picks hanging on their lack of success at this point. So
if they are the worst team in the league, the Bears get the 33rd pick in the draft, which I'll take. Yeah, sure. Give this emerging Chicago Bears team that could potentially be a good playoff team the first pick in the second round to get even more talent. It's just like, ooh, yes, this is what a proper organization does. They look at bad ones and they say, yes, we're going to exploit you. It's a very weird experience as a Bears fan being on this side of trades as opposed to just...
Yeah. And so soon after, you were still on the other side of it when we managed to swindle you to take Chase Claypool for a second round pick. That was basically a first because it was the 32nd pick. So.
Yeah.
You're like, don't remind me. Fuck you.
Where's that sharp object?
Right. And the last one I wanted to talk about, honestly, I don't think this should be a quarterback battle. It is ludicrous to me that it is even being considered one. And that is the battle for the Las Vegas Raiders quarterback position. It's between Aiden O'Connell going up against Gardner Minshew for the starting role in Vegas. And O'Connell has not been impressive at all. I don't even know why he is being considered in this battle. He didn't do much of anything when he was given the opportunity last year for the Raiders. Whereas you look at Gardner Minshew, who came in for the Colts when Anthony Richardson went down, and he almost got the Colts to the playoffs.
One game away.
Right? And the Colts didn't have a great team. They had a good team, but you look at this Raiders team and, the mistake I made earlier, they've got Devontae Adams to throw the ball to. They've got one of the best defenses now in the league with Max Crosby and I'm forgetting who it was.
Christian Wilkins.
Christian Wilkins, like they're going to be dominant in that way. I think this job should just be Gardner Minshew's. He has shown that he has the ability to be a starter in this league. He's proven that he can get the job done in the NFL. He needs to be the starter for this Raiders team. Hands down. I cannot believe that this is even a battle, and that is why I want to talk about this one, because it's ludicrous to me that they are putting Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell in a battle for a quarterback position when one is clearly a starting quarterback in this league and the other is very obviously just a perennial third stringer.
Yeah, I think Aiden O'Connell is a little bit more than just a perennial third stringer. I think he's a second stringer. Do I think he's a high value second stringer? No. But yeah, I look at this, and when the Raiders signed Gardner Minshew, I went, that's a solid pickup for them, because Aiden O'Connell, what's one of the biggest things as a quarterback you need to be able to do? And that is hit your star players. When you have Devontae Adams, you should not be missing him. You should not have him have one catch when targeted 7 times in a game. You can't miss him that much, and Aiden O'Connell simply did that. Now, I get to hear a bunch of stuff that's coming out of Raiders camps due to family, and it's going, well, Aiden O'Connell, like he's showing some people that he's working with Devontae Adams this year. He's really impressed. I'm like, that's great in shorts, where it's like, oh, he's finding Devontae Adams in shorts. You know what that isn't right now? A game. And you know what happened last year in the games? He would throw Devontae Adams the ball, but he would throw it 7 feet taller than what Devontae Adams can jump. Devontae Adams has got a good vertical. He ain't got that good of a vertical. And
yeah, he's got a good vertical, but he doesn't have Madden vertical.
Yeah, he doesn't have Madden 15 middle linebacker vertical where you can jump 20 feet in the air. And with the Raiders, now, you look at Aiden O'Connell's numbers. He played in 11 games, 12 TDs, 7 INTs, 2,200 yards. Look at Gardner Minshew's 3,305 yards, played in 17 games last year. So he came in pretty much every single time, Anthony Richardson got hurt. He had 15 TDs, 9 interceptions. But again, you kind of go back to those stats are a little bit of a liar thing that I talked about with, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. When I looked at both of those guys last year, Gardner Minshew was more in control, he was more calm, and he's going to have more players to work with because he has Devontae Adams. He's going to have Jacoby Myers. He's going to have Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer also be there in the receiving game. Michael Gallup is also not necessarily a bad player to throw the ball to. He's going to have more pieces that are there. The only guy he really had to throw the ball to last year with the Colts was Paris Campbell. That's it.
Well, Michael Pittman Jr.
Oh, no, Michael Pittman.
Quite a few of those games.
Yeah, I meant to say Michael Pittman Jr. Paris Campbell wasn't even really that much of an option last year. But
that was sort of the fallback option when Pittman went down. That was the issue in Indianapolis, really.
Yeah, and apologies, I meant to say Michael Pittman, but that was pretty much it last year. Yeah. He had a rookie, Josh Downs, who looked good, but again, it wasn't as reliable as he could have had. This time, he's going to have one of the best wide receivers we've seen in the game. He's going to have Jacoby Myers, who is an established guy who is good at what he does. And he's going to have one of the best tight ends to come out and another tight end who is also very, very good, which was one of the reasons why I think so many people were shocked that the Raiders took Brock Bowers. But having 2 really talented pass-catching tight ends, not a bad thing. And I think Gardner Minshew should just easily take this job. You and I are not in disagreement with that. It's just the easiest conversation that you and I pretty much could have with this is just, why is it a conversation? Again, I know people have said to me that I might have a little bit more biasy because I dislike what Aiden O'Connell did to my fantasy team. all he needed to do was throw 3 catches or 3 passes to Devontae Adams, and it's you and me in the final, but he couldn't manage to hit Devontae Adams 3 times off of 7 attempts. I'm not mad about that at all. No.
I don't have that bias. I hate the Raiders. You know, I'm a Steelers fan. We hate the Raiders.
Yep.
You know, through and through. And so, like, I look at it, and Gardner Minshew could get this Raiders team to the playoffs. Aiden O'Connell could definitely get this Raiders team to a top 10 pick.
Yeah. And with this defense the way that it is right now, I still think the Raiders have some things that they could fill out with the offense, but the defense and the defense, this is a team that could be fighting for the 7th spot in the playoffs for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, with Gardner Minshew as opposed to Aiden O'Connell.
Exactly.
So one of the last things that we want to talk about this week was a little bit of news that popped off with one of the star wide receivers in the NFL being Brandon Ayuk. Earlier this week, he requested a trade, and one of my biggest hopes was that the 49ers would not trade him before we had a chance to discuss about where he could see. I know for myself, I have teams that I think should trade for Brandon Ayuk, and I have teams that I'm seeing a lot of people say that they think should trade for Brandon Ayuk that I think if they did that, they'd be making a big mistake. And I know for yourself,
yeah, I've just got a couple of trade destinations that he could potentially go, what that trade would look like. One that's, you know, a little bit out there, a little bit more unique, you know, just for the fun of it. And then, you know, the obvious one of I hope my Steelers make the trade for him.
Yeah, so I have 4 teams that I think should trade for Brandon Ayuk. Those 4 teams being the Los Angeles Chargers, the Buffalo Bills, your Pittsburgh Steelers, and the New York Jets.
Okay, that's interesting. I also do have the Chargers on here. And I do have the Jets involved in a trade for Brandon Ayuk, but not the team receiving Brandon Ayuk.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, let's start with the Chargers since we both have that there. Do you want to go first, or would you like to see what I've cooked up?
I'll start with this because I know throughout the week, the second that the news came out, the first message that I sent to you was he's going to the Chargers.
Yeah.
And the biggest reason why I think he's going to the Chargers is because the Chargers went through this offseason basically tearing some stuff down. But when you have a guy like Justin Herbert, and he is a top 5 quarterback in the league, he is up there. Like, I don't think many people can argue the fact that he's one of the best quarterbacks in football. You don't have enough weapons for him. You got rid of, you know, like what I said, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and sure, you drafted Ladd McConkey and you drafted Brendan Rice and another wide receiver in the draft, but those are really more hopefuls more than anything. The Chargers have a unique situation of where they were a bad team last year due to injuries and a handful of other factors, mostly being their head coach was a dumbass, to the point where if they can get Justin Herbert a true number 1 weapon to throw the ball to and have all those extra guys, because again, if Ladd McConkey steps up and Quentin Johnston also steps up, that wide receiver room all of a sudden starts to look like what we saw with the Texans last year of like, okay, here we go. And then you already have that insane duo of your tackles with Joe Alt, and I'm forgetting the other tackle that they drafted a few years ago, but with your head coach with Harbaugh there, that just makes this team a playoff contender right away. Because right now, the way that I see it, and when we talked about this a few weeks ago, I had it the Chiefs, the Raiders, Chargers, Broncos. But if the Chargers get Brandon Ayuk, that all of a sudden makes them more likely to kind of be in that number 2 spot and competing for that 6th, 7th spot in the wild card and going like, okay, all it took was a new head coach and a new wide receiver for Justin Herbert.
Yep. Oh, 100%. What do you have the Chargers sending back? Because the issue the Chargers have is that cap space, unfortunately.
Yes.
You know, they don't have the room to be able to give Ayuk the contract he wants, because that's what it's going to come down to. Is Ayuk wants that trade?
He does. He
But
wants that
to go somewhere
contract.
that's going to give him 3 or 4 years and near that $30 million mark, which the Chargers don't have. They've got enough to cover this year's contract, which I think is about $14 million, but that extension is where the issue comes into play.
Yeah, next year they're gonna have a lot more money to play with, and I know when we were texting, it was 41-ish million. They're gonna be able to open up more money next year. They're gonna likely move on from some guys to get more picks back, and so that money will. I'm not worried about the money situation for Brandon Ayuk. And one of the things that I talked to you when we were texting throughout the week that I said was, I think a smart team like what the Chargers could do is say, listen, Brandon, we know you want to make $31 million a year or $30 million a season. We're going to give you $10 million in actual cap hit money, but you're going to get $20 million for a signing bonus. We're going to give you more signing bonuses per year type situation. So it's going to be a lower cap hit. That's what the smart teams do. That's one way to kind of keep it. And you can just say to him, it's like, listen, man, like, we know you want to make this. This is the deal that we are going to be offering you. You get to play with a top 5 quarterback. Because, again, with Brandon Ayuk, he's never gotten to play with a quarterback of this caliber. He's gotten to play for a head coach who can scheme things up, who is, in my opinion, the second best offensive mind in the NFL, in Kyle Shanahan, but never a quarterback of Justin Herbert's caliber. And so, for me, I think the Chargers would have to send a first and a fourth. And for the Chargers, they're a team where if they can get back into the playoffs, that first round pick isn't really much of an issue for them. And a fourth round pick, I don't think you're going to see Brandon Ayuk go for 2 first round picks. It's he's not a game breaking wide receiver like Tyreek Hill. I think a first round and a fourth round is probably going to be the highest that someone sends for him. If anything else.
Yeah, that's fair. See, I have the Chargers making that trade as well, but not giving up any of the draft picks because I know Harbaugh does like to be able to build his team through the drafts, and he's not going to want to give that up. And I think we see the 49ers sort of holding the Chargers and going, well, look, we'll give you Ayuk, but we really want to be able to play the brothers Bosa together. And seeing them send back Joey Bosa straight up, no draft picks involved, that also frees up some more of that cap space for the Chargers to be able to both sign Ayuk and still have room to make more moves next offseason instead of just being able to sort of stand their ground. And so that is more the trade I saw them doing is Ayuk for Joey Bosa, straight across, no draft picks having to go either way, and that would be the ideal for both teams because that would just, the 49ers being able to put Nick and Joey on the field together, having those brothers playing, that would make an already fearsome defense just so devastating to play a game.
Yeah, and it's something that could work because the Chargers still have Khalil Mack. I know in this not previous draft, but the draft before, they drafted an edge rusher out of UCLA, Tulu. I butchered the hell out of that last name there, but it's something that they could do, and we already knew Joey Bosa was kind of on the trading block a little bit this offseason anyways, and so that could be a fairly interesting one, but the only concern I have with that is that the 49ers, with their cap situation, whether they could afford that. I'm sure they would say to the Chargers, we'll do that, but you're going to still have to take a chunk of Joey Bosa's contract.
Yeah. That's fair. And I mean, Joey Bosa also isn't under contract for very long. He's got this season and then next season. So this is a trade I could see the Niners also going, okay, we're bringing you in, Joey. We're going to extend you a couple years and just stretch out how much you're getting paid a little bit so that you can play with your brother. You're going to take a little less money. It's not going to hurt our cap. I could see something like that happening and them back and loading that to be.
Yep.
Okay. Once we've got the cap space available, then
there's a lot of workarounds for sure.
Yeah, there's moving parts, and I wasn't strictly adhering to the cap with some of these trades just because we know teams they have ways to
manipulate the cap in that type of situation.
Exactly. Make it work. So
we know the New Orleans Saints have credit card debt that's spans 20 years.
Yeah.
Another team, like I said, Chargers, Bills, Steelers, Jets. We'll talk about your Steelers here in a quick second for teams that I think that should, but I'm just gonna do kind of like a quick round with these next two teams. The Bills, again, they got rid of a bunch of guys for cap reasons. They're gonna be able to open up a lot more cap space again next year as well. They need that guy, and having Brandon Ayuk go with Keon Coleman, and he'd be going to play with another top, not even a top 5, a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, and be in a good situation. That would just be a good move for the Bills because they need someone a little bit more on that solidified side of things. With the New York Jets, that's simply just the Jets we're going all out for Rodgers this year just to get this done. Again, Garrett Wilson is a phenomenal wide receiver, but if we can add Ayuk to that, that just makes us even more Super Bowl contendy in what is a very, very tough division. And so those are two reasons. And again, Aaron Rodgers, just getting him all the weapons that you possibly can. Worked on with a little bit the O-line this year. So that's just I see that move as a situation for the Jets of where they say, listen, Brandon, we're not going to be able to give you the contract. We're going to give you a Super Bowl, and then you get to walk out into free agency and choose where you get to go, essentially.
Yeah.
Now, is that going to be his most ideal situation? Probably not. And I see if the Jets were to do this, they would probably have to give up like a first and a third just to try to get that convincing of a situation. And again, it doesn't really matter. They could offer him a first and a fourth, and the 49ers take that deal. It's just they look at IU and go, listen, this is for a Super Bowl. We're not going to be able to pay you, but you get to be a free agent. Bills, they would try to get that deal done, and I think they would get that deal done. But for both of those two teams, it's, they're going after him for different reasons and for different lengths, but they're both teams that I could see be fairly interested in going after Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, understandable. The other teams I have is the Washington Commanders because they have been talked about a lot. Obviously, it's not the best fit. It's not going to see success necessarily, but it's something that Ayuk himself has expressed an interest, being able to go play with his former teammate when they were together in Arizona State. And that would make a pretty formidable duo of Terry McLaurin and Brandon Ayuk. That's a pretty good wide receiver set right there. The Commanders likely would have to part with a first for sure, and then either a second or a third in one of the upcoming drafts as well. I think they would make them pay pretty heavily for Ayuk myself.
Especially with them being in the NFC.
Yeah. I think this is probably the worst option for all parties involved because it's cost more. The Niners would be the only ones that sort of win from this.
Yeah.
And then the sort of interesting trade that I came up with, it's a 3-team trade. And so we don't see many of these anymore. But what I have is Ayuk being traded to the Raiders, with the Raiders sending a second or third round pick back to the 49ers. At the same time,
Raiders send Devontae Adams to the Jets.
Devontae Adams to the Jets to be reunited with Aaron Rodgers, which we all know they both would like to see. The Jets, however, are going to have to pay a little bit more to see this get done. And they're going to send their first rounder to the 49ers along with a third as well. So the Niners picking up lots of picks, no players out of it. And then the Jets probably still having to send another player to the Raiders to sweeten the pot and get this deal done. But this would be the most unique trade, I think. And honestly, I think this ends up being a win-win-win for all 3 teams. The Niners clear Ayuk out. They get a bunch of draft picks in the process.
Raiders get a young wide receiver that they can build off of, and the Jets get that reunite.
Exactly, yeah. The Jets get Adams for the same price. They're with the Raiders moving Adams out, they then have the money to be able to give Ayuk what he wants. So they're basically sidestepping to another great wide receiver one.
Who's hell of a younger.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so that is why I sort of manufactured this trade, because I think it would be a win on all sides.
Yeah, so before we talk about your Steelers trade, I do want to
Yep.
talk about the two teams that I don't think should trade for Brandon Ayuk, and you already mentioned one of the teams, and that's the Washington Commanders and the New
Yep.
England Patriots. Um, we always talk about surrounding young quarterbacks with a lot of talent. I think for the Commanders, they have Terry McLaurin, they have Jahan Dotson. I'm sure they would love another really good wide receiver in that room to help out after losing Curtis Samuels. And I know the Patriots, they don't really have anyone in terms of wide receiver, so they would just love someone for Mac Jones to throw the ball to. My problem is with that is that if either of those two teams gets Brandon Ayuk, that doesn't solve the myriad of other issues those teams have, and they're essentially giving away a top 10 pick for a wide receiver that right now isn't going to change the fortune of the franchise. And that right there is, if again, like what you said for the Commanders, if they were to go out and do it, I know Ayuk has said he wants to go play with Jaden Daniels. Yippee! But it's not going to be as fun when Jaden Daniels week 5 is on the stretcher leaving for the rest of the season because he has no offensive lineman in front of him. And then guess what? Since there's no first round pick, you can't draft one of those top offensive linemen to go help your guy. And then it's just this myriad of issues of just like, okay, he's down again, and how much fun is that going to be for you having to go to a city that's a hell of a lot colder, it's a hell of a lot less nice than where you're currently at. And talk about the Patriots, it's the same situation. There's so many holes on that team that, yeah, sure, Ayuk would be great for. Did I say Mac Jones? I meant Drake May.
You did, but
Yeah.
I knew you meant Drake May. I
Yeah.
think everybody probably was thinking that. But yeah, I mean, I agree. If this was a year later, then it could be a good trade for either of these teams because they would be able to add some more pieces to this rebuild. And there would be some experience for either May or Daniels already there.
Exactly.
So that would make more sense. Right now, you're absolutely correct. This would be a waste of a trade.
It'd be a
Honestly,
disastrous
for either
trade.
of those teams, it feels like it's a trade that they're making simply to sell jerseys.
Yeah.
It's a merchandise trade.
Yeah. And even more so the merchandise trade for the Patriots, because
Yeah.
again, that funny graphic where they showed up last year where it was like the Steelers and all their players, and then it was Bill Belichick because they had no one. And like, I just can't look at that and go, that would be a good trade for either of those two teams to make, because it just doesn't help your team out now, and you're giving away assets that would help your team. Again, there's no guarantee that a first round pick is going to be good. There's no guarantee that a third round pick is going to be good. And you always want to go for proven players in the NFL, but you also need to have those young players that are cheap coming in. This is one of the things that we've seen with the Rams and bite them a little bit in the ass of not having first round picks since Jared Goff. But yeah, time to talk about your Pittsburgh Steelers and this particular trade. This is a team that I think is probably the favorite for Brandon Ayuk at the moment because, again, they are a team that is a contender. They are a team that needs a wide receiver. They are a team that can afford his contract. The problem being, and there's a handful of, do the Steelers want to put themselves in a position of where they go, we are going to get Brandon Ayuk with the uncertainty at quarterback. That's definitely going to help whoever's playing quarterback. Is that going to be enough for us to get over that hump of winning that wild card game? It might be enough to win a wild card game, but is it going to be enough to win a divisional game or an AFC championship game? And giving Ayuk that contract, that hurts the Steelers probably in a much different way because you have guys like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick that you are going to have to pay. And we've been talking about TJ Watt these last few weeks of going like, you want to see him retire as a Pittsburgh Steeler, and this is kind of one of those years where it's going to be kind of the situation of him going like, do I really want to stay with this organization if I can't get that win? Or the organization saying, listen, we want you here, but we need to go in a complete rebuild direction. Unless you are happy you're taking less money and being on a team that's going to be a little bit worse, we want to trade you to help speed this rebuild up. And if you sign Ayuk to that big contract that he wants, that tightens up the checkbook for TJ Watt, and that starts to make things a little bit, tighter. And again, we talked about it earlier, of just like, oh, you can do this, and this to manipulate the cap and get more space, but the face of the franchise that's been that guy for the last few years, or a shiny toy that when it's kind of like adding a new exhaust to a car that has engine problems.
Yeah.
Where it's super fancy.
Yeah, let's throw this nice titanium exhaust on this Toyota Corolla.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of issues already on this.
Mm-hmm.
Does this, but again, it improves the wide receiver room. Mm-hmm. It increases your chances of going farther in the playoffs and having more wins this season. But it still just boils down to me of who's your quarterback?
Yep.
And is your offensive coordinator chewing on crayons?
Right. And I mean, as you mentioned with the Chargers, there is always the prospect of going, hey, we're going to pay you less in annual average value, but we're going to give you a big signing bonus to go with it.
Yep.
So that's always an opportunity, a possibility to be able
without
to
a doubt.
keep that cap space. Yep.
And that's one thing that I think the Steelers would do because they're a smart organization.
Yep. Oh, yeah. But then it also boils down to what are you sending back to 49ers to get this deal done?
First and fourth.
And it has to be a first for sure.
Yep.
I still think it's going to be a second or a third, or possibly even a player that could fit in with the 49ers. You know, they are looking for another edge rusher, and we do have Nick Herbig, who is a great number 3 on Pittsburgh right now, who could potentially be a number 2 on another team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's players like Calvin Austin or Darnell Washington that could bring that second or third down to a fourth or fifth. But I think the 49ers are going to want, you know, a top level pick outside of that first, a second or a third, even if it's not this year, next year, the year after, something like that. And it's going to take a player from one of these other teams we discussed to diminish that value down to a fourth or a fifth rounder.
I think most teams will be able to get away with a first and a fourth. I think if you're going to add like a third round pick, that'll be in the draft in 2026's draft as opposed. So, but yeah, like I understand where you're coming from of thinking like it could be a situation of them wanting more, but I think the market will be a situation of like, listen, guys, I'm not going to give you Calvin Austin. He's one of the guys that's kind of already been one of our more established wide receivers that we have. You know, Nick Herbig, because again, we always talk about the health of TJ Watt. And when we talked about your Steelers last week, I said if TJ Watt stays healthy, all things are good. But if he is hurt, then it's a big issue. Because again, we can look at Alex Highsmith and say he's a great edge rusher, but is he a guy that's going to be that game changer when TJ Watt isn't there? And is Nick Herbig going to be there? I think the Steelers would look at that and go, we'd be happy to send you a first this year and a third next year for Brandon Ayuk. We're not going to give you any players. Because again, at this point for the Steelers offense and defense, it's, you know, the defense less so, but the offense, you take away some of these other players, could change it a lot. And, you know, if you send Nick Herbig away, you're going, okay, it's really time for both of our boys to stay healthy, which unfortunately for both Highsmith and Watt, it's you're unfortunately rolling a 6-sided dice, and, you know, 1, 2, and 3 is injured, and 3, 4, 5, and 6 is healthy. Yeah. And it's a really tough gamble for that one. But yeah, I think first and a third or a first and a fourth is pretty much what you are going to need to send to get Brandon Ayuk. I don't think many teams are going to be looking at anything else. And if the 49ers are going no to that, they're crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, if they're saying no to that, then they're going, okay, well, we're going to play Brandon Ayuk this year, and then we're going to unfortunately
lose him for nothing.
Let him walk for nothing.
Which both of us hate that strategy. Don't lose superstar talent for fuck all.
Exactly.
But I think that is all for us here today, unless you want to touch a little bit more on that Steelers situation. But thank you all for joining us for another week of football talk. But till then, for Sterling, I'm Brendan, saying peace.